Hi, this is Dave Douglas for Greenleaf Music and our podcast about music and musicians, A Noise from the Deep. And that's the music of Anna Weber. She's a composer and a reed player based in Brooklyn, originally from British Columbia. She's releasing a new septet recording on Pi called Clockwise. And we'll listen to and talk about the new recording as well as some of her earlier work with a trio on Chris Speed's label Skirl. That record is called Binary. So much great new music, and as many have remarked, it's a golden age for this new music. This is episode 61. It's a monthly conversation with mostly musicians talking about how they work, where the music comes from. And if you enjoy the episodes, please come join us at greenleafmusic.com. I'm also going to sneak in a little of the music that Anna recently recorded with my new band, Engage, on bass flute. And you can hear the whole suite by joining up and supporting the music and musicians at Greenleaf. And as always, you can email me directly about this show at podcast@greenleafmusic.com. In fact, I encourage it. So please come by, get access to our entire catalog, including hours of exclusive music. And here's the interview with Anna Weber with a little more music first. This is her piece. It's called Core 2. Thanks for listening. You said you've been told you...
I've been told I have a decent radio voice.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll keep that. Perfect. And I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah, me too.
So we're listening to Kora. You said that's how you pronounce it. It's K-O-R-E 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And, okay, so my first question is, a lot of your titles have the number 2 or the Roman numeral 2 in the name. Is that like a part of the process? Does that mean that it's a version 2 or an elaboration of something?
Well, it is sort of a coincidence that there are so many pieces on my new record that have the Roman numeral 2 in the title. Also a coincidence that I sent you Rectangles 2 as sort of a lead up to this. Yeah, I guess in the case of Cora, there are only 2. There's 1 and 2, and they were originally supposed to be the same piece, and then I broke it up, and because they were turning out to be two
like
halves that were pretty different.
The second half of a piece.
Yeah, and it wasn't like it became clear, very clear at some point within the process that the 2 pieces were not the same thing. So I had to split them up. Idiom 2, which is also going to be talked about, is actually part of a much longer series of pieces. Oh. I'm about to do some playing with my trio with John Hollenbeck and Matt Mitchell, and with that group, we're playing 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Of course.
Of idiom. Yeah. And
totally
then,
logical.
Yeah, and then I'm writing a new piece called Idiom 6 for a larger ensemble.
But the fact that it has the same title has to do with the writing process, would you say? Or is it just sort of like came out of you see it as a follow-up to the earlier pieces, like sequential?
Well, in the case of Idiom, those are all coming from the same... They're all pieces that are based on woodwind extended technique, specifically woodwind extended technique that I use.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we're going to hear some of that in a bit. Let's hear just a little bit more of Cora.
Sure.
Cora 2, so 2 being the second part of a piece. And like process-wise, I don't know. I'm not so smart, but it sounds like there's an additive process here. Like there's small details that with each repetition, or maybe not each repetition, after certain repetitions, the idea grows. Either gets longer or more complex.
Yeah, it is definitely an additive thing. I can't actually remember how that piece started, but I wrote all the music, most of the music on this new album that I have, Clockwise, which is coming out, based on 20th century classical percussion music.
Oh.
And both the choras are based on Persephassa by Xenakis.
When you say based on, what do you mean exactly?
So I basically spent 6 months to a year, even more longer than that, very slowly and leisurely analyzing these classical percussion works, just in kind of a non-scholarly way, listening to a bunch of different recordings, checking out scores, reading what the composers had written about them, and taking notes for myself, and ended up coming up with lists of ideas that I thought could be a starting place for a new composition. And most of those ideas weren't specific musical ideas, or not, specific musical ideas in terms of specific phrases or pitch sets or whatever. They were usually more formal ideas or orchestration ideas, something a little bit larger.
When you say formal ideas, just for me and my not smart friends, you don't mean formal like they're dressed up in a tuxedo. You mean like...
No, that's exactly what I mean.
I see.
No, of course.
I know those ideas. No, you mean form in terms of structure, the order in which things happen.
Yeah,
was
exactly.
The kinds of one of the kinds of inspirations or elements that you were making notes on to foresee using somehow in a piece.
Yeah. So then when I actually sat down and started writing the music, I looked over that and kind of re-familiarized myself with the original piece of music.
Yeah.
So the idea was more to not, maybe to pay homage, but also just to kind of find points of resonance within those original compositions and find ways of recontextualizing those. And
a direction to point yourself to write something new.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
I can see that. And then it's always interesting because I've heard so many composers talk about this when, breaking down certain kinds of elements in the music that you're analyzing or listening to or learning from, and then taking off in a new direction based on those elements. And so in a way, you're borrowing something, you're just imitation, but it's not the kind of imitation that anyone would come to your show and go, hey, man, hey, woman, you stole that from Xenakis.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of homage or...
Yeah, well, I hope not, at least.
Well, I mean, it was interesting that you also listed orchestration as one of your, areas of interest in studying those pieces. But this is a mixed septet of sort of, for the most part, instruments associated with jazz.
Yeah.
There's only one... Well, there's two percussionists. There's a drummer and a pianist.
Yeah.
But it's not... So how, tell me about how you might use the element of orchestration in that sense to write for the septet.
That's a good question. I guess
Well, thanks. Sorry.
it's a good question that I am having trouble thinking of
Well, let me
specific
just,
ways.
I mean, in case anybody doesn't know the record, and I guess it's coming out very soon on Pi Recordings, it's called Clockwise, and it's Jeremy Viner on woodwinds, Jacob Garchick on trombone, Christopher Hoffman on cello, Matt Mitchell on piano, Chris Tordini on bass, and Chess Smith on drum set. And you're playing flutes and tenor saxophone?
Yep.
And there's no overdubs, in case anyone was wondering.
Well, there is one overdub, but not
Uh-oh.
on the pieces that I sent you.
Okay.
We actually overdubbed chess playing timpani at the on the very last
Right,
piece
of
of the
course.
record. So orchestration,
Yeah.
maybe in terms of density,
Interesting.
rather than in terms of specific instrumentations.
Right.
So there's a piece, another one that we'll talk about in a bit, Clockwise,
Mm-hmm.
which is based on this Stockhausen piece, Zyklus. And that is dealing with a bunch of different levels of determinancy and density. And so I took those ideas and kind of built this piece around that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is super interesting. Do you feel like you always go through that process before you begin to write something?
Not necessarily to that extent.
But let's say I know you're working on big band music also when you sit down to begin one of those scores. Do you go through some sort of process where you're culling ideas and elements and things that you want to draw from?
Yeah, I would say my pre-compositional process is pretty lengthy.
Okay. I'm kind of the same way, and I feel like it keeps me from falling into writer's block or different traps.
Totally.
Having something to write about and some parameters.
And I want to know the material that I'm working with really well before I start making decisions about it. I want to know all the different things that a certain idea could be. You know, if I had this idea as a bass line in the first place, what if it were also the melody, or what if it, got turned into harmony or flipped into a rhythm somehow?
Right.
So for me, it's important just to explore all the different possibilities that come out of specific basic ideas.
You mentioned this piece, Idiom 2, where you're drawing on, alternate fingering techniques and microtonality on the saxophone.
Yep.
So you're writing for two saxophones, and you've used this technical idea to develop the initial opening of the piece, shall we say. Is that part of that, as you would see it?
Yeah.
Let's listen to a little bit of Idiom 2. All right, so that's Idiom 2 from Clockwise, and we weren't able to listen to the whole thing, but there's a lot of development in the piece. And like you said earlier, the initial idea, the opening comes from a technical aspect of playing, that and you develop the idea out of that. How much would you say the initial idea affects the rest of the development as the piece goes along?
This piece I usually write in a very algorithmic way, pretty mathematical in terms of how I develop ideas. I take pitches and turn them into numbers and do a lot of my pre-compositional process using that.
So you're generating melodic material using numbers.
Yeah, for example.
But or other kind of parameters.
Rhythmic, harmonic, whatever. Just trying to find a kind of a grammar that's specific, grammar or syntax that's specific to a certain piece of music. But with this one, I didn't do that, and it was actually kind of a scary piece for me to write because I wrote it more intuitively. I wanted to use this venting fingering thing on the saxophone, and so came up with the basic line that you hear right in the beginning.
What's the venting? Tell us what
So
that
venting is when you hold a key open and then actually play notes normally, but you're holding one key open, so it makes it sound really microtonal.
I see.
And Jeremy and I actually have almost the exact same line that we're playing, but we're using two different ventings, so they
Right.
end up sounding approximately a major second apart. Yeah, so I was just improvising with that, and then I wrote it down, and I was playing around with stuff, recording it, and then the ending section of this piece too, which is a bunch of quarter tone block chords. Essentially, I improvised that and then wrote it out. And, once I had all these basic building blocks, I was playing around with ideas and developing things in the way that I normally do. But I really tried to write this piece more intuitively than I normally would.
And you say that's harder for you.
It's not, I guess it's scarier because I have this thing in my mind that everything needs to be really logically connected in a way that I can say and verbalize.
But your music, there's very special, unusual quality to it that's very difficult from a musicality point of view, and in terms of playing it.
Yeah.
But also, how the improvisation comes into it is unique, I would say. And maybe it's this algorithmic way of preparing your materials that is what makes that.
Well, I guess I use algorithms to a point and then try to massage it with my humanness.
Yeah. Right.
Because
Well,
usually when
inevitable.
my tendency is both to overwrite and also to write things that are too boxy. So I do a lot
Wow.
of going back and massaging
Boxy.
things. Just here's a section, here's a section,
Oh,
here's
I
a
see.
section.
Interesting.
Trying to make
So you're blurring them
Yeah.
and changing the formal structures so
Yeah.
that it's not quite so regular.
exactly. And then when it comes to improvisation, I do a lot of thinking about ways of incorporating improv into pieces that are just a little more unpredictable than
I hate to even say it, but do you, improvisation and jazz and having a rhythm section and all this history of music that we've all studied, and you've obviously studied,
Uh-huh.
but it seems like your music is just going other places, and that's as it should be. You know, you don't have to have any relationship, but I just makes me want to ask, you know, when it comes to the improvisation or when it comes to the band playing and the interaction, do you feel like there's a kinship to jazz loosely defined?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm a jazz musician, and I define myself as that. I write for improvisers. I don't write for people who don't improvise. And so it's important to me that people feel some amount of freedom when they're playing my music. I know I write challenging music, and there's a lot of stuff on the page, but after stuff has been learned, I encourage people to take liberties with it, and to bring their own voice. And then I always make sure that there is improvisation, and everybody has sometimes, you know, with this new project, I made sure everybody had a feature, but I also made sure everybody had at least one moment where they were doing kind of secondary improvisation. You know, like, okay, maybe you're not the main soloist here, but you're still improvising, you're still doing this, like,
and not necessarily comping, but not the focal point of the moment. Yeah, that's hard. That's hard because, you know, I hear a lot of young players, and a lot of times I think that the biggest challenge is to figure out how to not be comping or soloing or playing a part, but be making music.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, a function of the complexity of your writing sort of demands that everybody be able to cross all of those different zones simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging, but luckily there's a lot of pretty good players in New York that can handle all of that stuff.
You seem to have picked some of the best here. They're killing it. Let's hear this, a little bit of the title track from the record. So I notice it's not called Clockwise 2.
It's actually, the full title is Clockwise B to A.
Oh, okay. All right,
which
good.
I haven't really told anybody about that, but
you don't fail to disappoint. Wait, what was that? Is a double negative. Sorry.
I'm disappointed. So this is coming from the Stockhausen piece, Zyklus.
Oh.
And that piece theoretically can be played from any point in the piece, either upside down or right way up, to the same point in the piece. So theoretically, my piece also could be interpreted that way, not upside down, but you could start anywhere and then go back to the
What
same
was
place.
the orchestration for the Stockhausen piece?
It's solo percussion.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, all of the music that I was analyzing was either
For this
solo
project.
percussion or percussion
ensembles.
Yeah.
All right, so here's Clockwise. Clockwise. So that's the title track. What's the official release date for the record?
February 22nd.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, this will be out in time for that.
Great.
In case you're listening to this as an archived podcast, this is the year 2019. I've had that happen. Now, we can talk about the structure and the form about that some more, but I think it's interesting, you having come from British Columbia. Kelowna is how you pronounce it, right?
That is, yeah.
And I first met you at the Banff program over a decade ago, and you went to McGill, and we were talking outside the context of the show about sort of inspirations and things that you worked on, and it seems like a lot of the work you're doing now, it's very self-directed. Like it's this study of these percussion ensemble pieces that led to Clockwise is sort of, your own initiative in terms of finding your work. And we talked about Xenakis, and you mentioned Ligeti and Grisey and Chelsea and Feldman, but also having had this experience of meeting Ben Monder. And meeting John Hollenbeck, and having been, when you were at the program, I remember you were primarily a flute player.
Yeah. Jazz flute major in my undergrad.
And so, I mean, you were already writing and playing, but tenor sax is now new. And your first record was on Skirl, Chris Speed's label. And I guess, like, the music is what brought you to New York initially, right? How long have you been living here now?
Since 2008.
In Brooklyn the whole time?
No, I actually did a master's degree at Manhattan School.
Oh, I didn't know that. Great.
Yeah. So that's provided the visa for me to move down. And also, I was interested in getting a master's degree, and I got a lot out of that program. And I mean, so I was a jazz flute major in my undergrad, and people knew me as a jazz flautist in Montreal. But when I moved here, even though I was accepted as a jazz flutist too at Manhattan School, I made a point of bringing out the saxophone first, because I always played saxophone, but I just didn't really feel confident on it, or as confident as I did on flute. And it kind of worked for me, making sure that I just I don't necessarily feel the greatest on this instrument, but I'm going to make myself play it on every session as the first thing. And I slowly got better, and at this point feel like they're equal doubles.
Yeah, your tenor playing is amazing, and but it's also I would have to say, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I first knew you as a flautist, but I feel like there's a special quality in your tenor playing that people who have always just been tenor saxophonists don't have. It's a little different.
Thank you.
In a good way. Yeah, absolutely. But already on Binary, your trio record, you were playing tenor.
Oh, I mean, I've been playing tenor seriously for a fairly long time. Binary came out in 2016. I had another record before that, Simple, with my trio, which came out in 2014. And then I lived in Germany for a year, and when I was there, I had a band called Percussive Mechanics, which is a septet, and I was playing tenor in that too. So I've been.
Was that in Berlin or?
Yeah.
Oh.
I just lived in Germany from 2011 to 2012, just
Nice.
1 year. Yeah. So tenor's been part of my main musical voice for almost 10 years at this point, I would say, maybe even more than that. Yeah.
Do you feel more like a composer than a player, or equally?
I would say pretty equal. They're two sides of the same personality, and I would feel pretty devastated if I couldn't do one or the other.
Yeah, it's true. But also, I mean, now that you're presenting these bands and putting these records out, it's all your music, and it's all, and it's really great, unique stuff.
Thank you.
So you have this tune called Underhelmed.
Yeah.
Which is, one of the great titles. Does it need an explanation?
Underwhelmed if you're
Underhelmed.
many critics writing about it.
Oh, is that right? I'm sorry to hear that.
No.
What do they know? You're
people don't think I didn't proofread, but no, it's underhelmed.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
You probably got critics where they wrote underwhelmed because they weren't paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's what press releases are for.
Yeah.
You can tell them, why is it called underhelmed?
Well, I guess a lot of the stuff I wrote on, or the music for Binary, which this is from, I wrote right around Canadian election, like in 2015.
Oh my gosh.
And that was when Stephen Harper was running against Justin Trudeau, who then won.
Mm-hmm.
And so underhelmed is a really stupid pun on, like, let's reduce the military.
Wow.
Let's get Stephen Harper out.
Well, you did.
Office. We did, yeah.
He's still out there giving interviews and stuff, but
Not that Trudeau is the guy that I would endorse heartily, but he's definitely
I try really hard not to bring politics into this podcast because it just would be an endless rabbit hole, and I like that we talk about music, so I'm not shutting that down. I'm just saying I would love to ask you about Canadian politics right now, but I'm not going to. We're going to hear
totally
underhelmed.
Fine.
So that's underhelmed, and the first time I listened to it, I was wondering about overdubs, and I think it's just that your unison with Matt Mitchell's right hand and the piano is so tight.
Oh, thanks.
That I was like, how is that possible? So Matt is playing, I mean, it's trio, in that case, tenor saxophone, piano, and drums, John Hollenbeck and Matt Mitchell, and Matt's playing an incredibly independent bass line and the melody with harmonizations under it simultaneously, and then it sounds like the second time around maybe he switches, or you switch to the bass part.
Every possible
it's all
possibility.
The permutations.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are 5 or 6 melodies, and it's every combination of those that happen either in the saxophone or the piano, right hand, piano, left hand, solo, etc.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was everything you wrote for that band sort of equally intricate like that?
There's a lot of very intricate music for that group, for sure. Matt says that's, or at the time, was the hardest thing that I'd written for him specifically. I think the fact that none of the counterpoint repeats itself through the hands makes it particularly challenging.
Well, he's a very good reader and
an
an incredible performer. Don't tell me he memorized it.
Oh, he did not memorize it. No.
Okay. I'm relieved. You know what? I do want to go ahead and just play a little Rectangles 2.
Sure.
Rectangles 2, it's Matt Mitchell on piano, John Hollenbeck on drums, and, of course, Anna Weber. Just 25 words or less, what's going on there rhythmically? Or you can use more words if you want to.
Yeah, maybe I'll use a couple more words. So there are these binaries. The music that I wrote for that record is all, the source material was all from the internet.
What do you mean? What part of the internet?
All sorts of parts.
Yeah, but not the kitten, cute, like puppy videos.
Well, I actually made a video for Rectangles 2 that is a cat video.
Oh, see, I'm uninformed. I'm
Given that
underwhelmed.
the piece is a minute and a half long, so or even less than that. So I just made like this little video where I was playing with a cat to the rhythm. But that piece is coming from this YouTube channel called WebDriver Torso, which has these.
I'm not familiar with that channel.
Yeah, not too many people would be. It's a really bizarre channel that has these 10-second clips, and 10 pitches per clip, and it's non-tempered. It's just hertz, and along with each pitch, there's a red or a blue rectangle that flashes across the screen. So I wrote 3 pieces based on those videos, and that's why there are 3 rectangles on the album.
Hence Rectangles 2.
So they're all connected. Rectangles 2 is the second of those. And rhythmically, the left hand is a series of 4.5 beat. There's, I think, 5 4.5 beat loops that repeat themselves. And then the right hand is twice through a form, which is basically just, I wanted something to sound like it was expanding and contracting. So, that's...
But you're deriving the pitches from this website.
Yeah, exactly. And then through the pitches, I derived the rhythm.
Wow.
Yeah, at least of the left hand.
Cool. Wow, well, thank you. I was going to ask you about playing bass flute and alto flute and how tricky that is. But I guess I would also just mention that you and my good friend Angela Morris are working on a big band project that I've heard and is amazing. It's incredible.
Thank you.
So I guess the first question is, do you write differently when you write for a large ensemble? Or is it the same set of procedures?
I would say it's the same set of procedures. I mean, the number of voices that one can pick out of you're not going to write 18 different separate interlocking voices for big bands. So you have maybe 3 or 4 max.
Well, the music does sound different. What I've heard of it sounds different than the septet and then the trio.
Sure, yeah. A lot of it's a little bit older, so I think that has something to do with it. There's some development within my compositional process. But yeah, I mean, I think the basics are the same, starting from a small idea and having a lot of pre-compositional time to just work out all the different permutations. And then with big bands, something that I've thought about quite a lot is how to make a big band not sound like a big band.
Yeah.
Because it's...
Me too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very specific sound, as you know, and it's something that...
And there's so many different approaches to it now. So then being aware of that and having played in a lot of those bands, you also have that to go up against and not replicate what somebody else is doing, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, it's really unique, and I think your writing and Angela's writing complement each other really well.
Oh, thank you.
I know that having to play in your own large ensemble stuff is sometimes really demanding. If you have to conduct it and turn around and play tenor saxophone.
Yeah.
But if, playing bass flute in a large ensemble is a whole other level of challenge, isn't it? I mean, it's an instrument you don't hear that often.
No.
It's a very delicate dynamic, doesn't it?
It's very quiet, yeah. I mean, I haven't written anything for the big band that has bass flute in it, probably for practicality reasons. I mean, it's it's so quiet that unless if the texture is really, really
Well, you've
sparse.
been playing in this new band of mine called
Yeah.
Engage, and some of the pieces you're playing bass flute.
Yep.
And so maybe selfishly, I'm log rolling because I want people to hear this, and it is by dint of the way the project came about and the way we're releasing it. It's for subscribers only. We're trying to, bring people in that really want to hear this music. So you play the introduction to this piece that's called "In It Together" on the bass flute, and it's just gorgeous.
Thank
It's
you.
in the very lowest range of the instrument, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of that first melody is.
Well, thank you for having played it,
Oh, totally.
and
Yeah.
thank you for joining me on the podcast. It's fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Love the music,
Thank you.
and congratulations on the new record.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll be hearing a lot more music. Thanks, Anna.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ah.